In 1924, the gavel fell, and the fate of John Dillinger, just 21 years old, was sealed. For a clumsy, almost desperate attempt to rob a grocery store that netted him a paltry $50, he was sentenced to 10 long, agonizing years behind bars. In the dusty courtroom, a faint hope of his reformation hovered, that the strict prison walls would return the wayward youth to the true path. Newspapers, whose headlines screamed about the firm hand of the law, shaped public opinion about justice and order. But beyond these dry courts, in an atmosphere of foreboding about the coming Great Depression, America lived by its own rules. People increasingly trusted the system, increasingly hated the banks that seemed inexorably ruining their families, depriving them of everything they had. The place of his so-called reformation was the grim and unwelcoming Indiana State Penitentiary in Michigan City. The moment the heavy steel gates slammed behind the young Dillinger with a deafening thud, he felt the world shrink to the confines of his cramped cell and hope evaporate like smoke. It was not a hospital for the soul, but rather a graveyard for hopes and illusions, where every day was a struggle for survival. The air inside the prison walls was heavy and thick, saturated with the smells of sweat, fear, despair, and cheap prison tobacco. Hundreds of eyes, belonging to the most hardened and desperate criminals in the Midwest, watched his every move, studying, assessing, trying to determine his place in this new, brutal hierarchy. John was a fresh fish in a shark tank, and he had to quickly learn the rules of this ruthless game if he wanted to survive. In his first months, Dillinger learned the key rule of survival in this stone labyrinth. Be invisible, but don't appear weak. He avoided conflict, working silently in the prison laundry, where the steam and hard labor hid him from prying eyes, and observed carefully. He studied the unspoken rules, identified leaders and outsiders, memorizing the faces and habits of those who wielded real power behind bars. The dusty baseball field became his escape and his stage. A former semi-professional player, Dillinger possessed a talent that could not be hidden. Every accurate throw, every hit from shortstop, was not just a game, but a demonstration of composure and skill. It was here, under the watchful eyes of hundreds of prisoners, that he ceased to be an anonymous newcomer. And it was here that he was noticed by those seeking not just strong men, but intelligent and reliable people for future endeavors. The one who spotted his talent was Harry Pete Pierpont. In the prison hierarchy, Pierpont was a general, not a soldier. A seasoned bank robber known for his cool intellect and meticulous planning, he commanded unquestioned authority. He saw people as tools and opportunities. In Dillinger's composure on the field, he saw not just a good player, but a man with discipline and potential that could be channeled. Their first meeting was brief. After one game, Pierpont approached Dillinger as he was leaving the field. There were no threats or offers, just a quiet, poignant conversation. Pierpont assessed his performance, and then, looking him straight in the eye, asked about his 10-year sentence for a pittance. In that simple question, Dillinger for the first time felt not pity, but an acknowledgement of his grievance as legitimate. This was the first lesson. Anger is a weakness, but anger, properly channeled, is a weapon. From that day on, his real training began. Dillinger's conversation with Pierpont became a gateway into the inner circle. He was soon introduced to the rest of the crew: Charles Mackley, an explosives and safe expert; Russell Clark, a loyal and fearless enforcer; and John "Red" Hamilton, a seasoned robber. Their lectures took place in the hum of the prison workshops, or in the steamy, stuffy laundry, where the roar of the machines drowned out their quiet but weighty words. This wasn't just a prisoner gathering. It was a meeting of a shadowy board of directors planning a hostile takeover. The first course at their university wasn't weapons handling, but the art of planning. Pierpont would spend hours drawing diagrams of the banks he was robbing or planning to rob in chalk on the concrete floor. He put Dillinger through his paces, forcing him to calculate police reaction times, identify vulnerabilities in security, and plan escape routes. It was science, not brute force. For John, whose first case had been a complete improvisation and a failure, it was a revelation, transforming crime from an act of desperation into a precise, cold profession. The next lesson was the psychology of power. Pierpont taught that a true professional rarely shoots because he creates a situation in which shooting is unnecessary. Their main selling point was the Thompson submachine gun, which the prisoners respectfully called the Chicago typewriter. It wasn't just a weapon, but a symbol of power. Its deafening roar was meant to paralyze the guards and bank customers, turning chaos into a controlled spectacle. Dillinger learned to see the gun not as an instrument of murder, but as a director's console for manipulating fear. In these clandestine seminars, they practiced every detail: who would guard the entrance, who would pacify the crowd, who would work the safe. Each role was clearly defined, but the core of their future enterprise wasn't a plan, but a code. Pierpont, using examples of other gangs destroyed by betrayal, hammered into Dillinger's head the central truth of their world. You can only trust those who share your cell and are willing to die for the common cause. Money can be stolen, but loyalty must be earned. The next lesson was the psychology of power. Pierpont taught that a true professional rarely shoots because he creates a situation in which shooting is unnecessary. Their main selling point was the Thompson submachine gun, which the prisoners respectfully called the Chicago typewriter. It wasn't just a weapon, but a symbol of power. Its deafening roar was meant to paralyze the guards and bank customers, turning chaos into a controlled spectacle. Dillinger learned to see the gun not as an instrument of murder, but as a director's console for manipulating fear. In these clandestine seminars, they practiced every detail: who would guard the entrance, who would pacify the crowd, who would work the safe. Each role was clearly defined, but the core of their future enterprise wasn't a plan, but a code. Pierpont, using examples of other gangs destroyed by betrayal, hammered into Dillinger's head the central truth of their world. You can only trust those who share your cell and are willing to die for the common cause. Money can be stolen, but loyalty must be earned. The years passed, turning into an endless series of gray days. The naive hope for an appeal and justice with which young Dillinger entered these walls had long since evaporated. In its place, influenced by Pierpont's cynical philosophy, a cold conviction grew that the system was his enemy. He stopped considering himself a failed citizen. He embraced his new role, that of an outcast, who would live by his own rules and take what he believed was his due. This internal change was reflected in his appearance. Prison photographs from those years no longer show a frightened youth, but a man with a hard, piercing gaze. Gone was the softness of youth, replaced by sharp, predatory features. He learned to move with quiet confidence, speak deliberately, and look at people in a way that made them instinctively sense his danger. Prison hadn't broken him. She forged him, turning the soft metal of his youth into hardened steel.
May 22, 1933. Release Day. For prison officials, it was a routine matter. Another prisoner had served his time. They saw before them only a record on the docket, a man they believed had paid his debt to society. They didn't see the steely determination in his eyes, didn't know of the oath sworn in the dark corners of the prison yard. He walked down the long corridor, each step taking him further from his past and closer to his predetermined destiny. When the steel gates that had greeted him almost 9 years earlier opened to let him out, the world seemed different. It was a world gripped by the Great Depression, full of desperate people and vulnerable banks. John Dillinger breathed in the air of freedom, but it wasn't a sigh of relief. It was the sigh of a predator on the hunt. The judge wanted prison to teach him to be a better man, and it did. She made him a better, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous criminal. This wasn't the end of his story. It was the real beginning.